I believe Bob Lazar. I believe what he's saying is true. I believe he's telling me. Now, Bob, he had one moment where he was passing by a window and he said he saw something that was small and these people were standing over it, and he didn't know if it was an alien or whether it was some sort of a form that they were trying, like a doll or something that's supposed to represent the size of an alien or some sort of a model of an alien. But he remembers he looked briefly through a window and he saw something small. He didn't see it move around. He didn't see it talk. So he doesn't know what he saw. Yeah. Because in his world, as he explained it, when he was working at Area 51 Site 4, that's where he worked, he said that it was very compartmentalized. And his thing is, one of the problems with them trying to figure out, now this is assuming he's telling the truth.
Yeah, of course.
One of the problems they were trying to figure out was how to back engineer these devices, these ships. But the problem was they weren't allowed to communicate with other people outside of this very limited group of people that had access to these vehicles. And the people that were involved in the metallurgy were not allowed to communicate with the people that were involved in whatever the propulsion system was. They didn't understand what they were trying to decipher these things. But he said, and if you listen to the podcast that I did with him, that it didn't work because the scientific method requires multiple people to communicate and share ideas and to explain, and they didn't do that.
You can't improve like that.
Right.
You need to share idea. Right. You can't do something and compartmentalize everything.
But my communication with him, I don't know if he was telling me the truth, but he didn't seem deceptive. Yeah. And he's a brilliant guy.
The craft and the way they operated didn't make any sense to us. I mean, that's something we talked about for a while after.
Why should the frequency bend around the craft?
Well, you really have to look at the way the gravity wave comes out of the craft. There's the reactor's in the center, and there's a waveguide that goes up to the top. There's actually a small appendage that sticks out of the top of the craft, and it produces a heart-shaped gravitational distortion around the craft. Now, if the craft is sitting in the air and you walk underneath it and look up, you actually cannot see the craft. The light bends around it. You're bending gravity, bends light. It bends radio waves. It shouldn't be possible to communicate with a craft that has an envelope around it that's distorting all forms of energy. But they were apparently in contact with it.
Somehow or another, through some unexplained way that they didn't bother explaining to you. Mm-hmm. So this thing gets up, it just does some very simple maneuvers, left, right, goes down. And did they discuss this with you? I mean, they said they wanted you to see it.
No, they just wanted, they didn't discuss anything with me. It sat down, we looked around for a bit, and Barry said, let's go back. We went back in the lab. All we got to do was see it. Fast forward to some months later, I did have the test flight schedule of the craft. Now, they had times they had designated high-performance tests. This obviously wasn't one that was a high-performance test. The high-performance test goes above the mountain range, and they do much more radical moves with the thing. Look, this is a prized item, and they're not doing anything like taking it out of the atmosphere or flying around to other countries or anything like that. They just play with this thing right over the test site. But they were doing some radical moves with it. And since I had the test flight schedule, statistically, the amount of traffic in the surrounding areas on the highway was lowest on Wednesdays. And that's why Dennis told us that all the test flights occurred only on Wednesdays, because it'd be the least chance that anyone would see what's going on.
And this was before the government had expanded the forbidden territory around Area 51 and Papoose Lake and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that occurred after my story came out. Then people started going up on the mountaintops and trying to look down into there, and they kind of freaked out and then did the land grab and pushed everybody back. But yeah, I think all that occurred long after that I came out.
So you're working there, and while you're working there, you're under this crazy schedule. Forgive me for explaining your story, but you would get these phone calls. You would have to go to the airport at 11 p.m. and your wife started thinking that you were having an affair.
Yeah, apparently so. Now, I did give my permission to have, as part of the, security clearance process, I gave written permission to have the phones monitored and things of that sort. So they weren't doing any covert stuff. They, with any Q clearance, which is civilian top secret clearance or military top secret clearance, they go talk to friends and, places you've been, make sure you're not connected to foreign countries. But, monitoring your phone is nothing unusual. However, they insisted that, you don't even talk to your loved one, to your partner, to your wife, whatever, about what's going on. So she was essentially in the dark and didn't know the phone was being monitored. Well, part of the security clearance is that not only do you not have any connections to foreign countries and aren't a maniac, but you have to have a stable home life too. Well, she started having an affair with a flight instructor. Now, they were monitoring this on the phone, and they knew it, and I didn't. So they stopped me coming in, and their attitude at the time was, we need to see how this is going to play out, and if Lazar is going to get a little weird or anything. So let's just, hold him off from coming in and, see what happens.
And they explained this to you, what was happening?
Well, after the fact, yeah, because time kind of went on, and there were guys that were following me around, and I started getting a little concerned, going, well, shit, are they booting me out of the project? And if so, they're not just going to let me hang out at home and go get a new job knowing what I know. So as time went on, I started getting a little concerned, and I took my closest friends and just kind of got together and I said, hey, remember that job I told you about? This is what's going on. Look at the, rocket technology in Germany.
But they got 9 of them?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me either. So they were either in the same area or, one had clues to where others were. I mean, I don't know. You have to fill that in there, but you're right. I mean, 9 of them, that's a big dig if it was archaeological.
Well, one of the more recent sightings and these discussions that have been coming out recently from Air Force pilots and Navy pilots, they've been talking about things happening in the ocean, and that something literally goes into the water, or something maybe below the surface of the water.
You're thinking about the 2004 Tic Tac Nimitz case. So that's when George Knapp and I broke on the radio twice before the New York Times, so I know this one really well. Commander Fravor and those pilots. There was a disturbance on the surface of the water. Commander Fravor visually saw what looked like similar to a cross, some object. So it's like as if you have some coral under the water and it's breaking over. Right. The Tic Tac is doing this crazy maneuver that defies. It's a gravity-propelled system.
They saw it in the sky before they saw it in the water, right?
Yeah, so there were radar that was picking these things coming down from 80,000 feet, dropping to 50 feet in less than a second.
This is it, Jamie? What is this?
Yeah, this is actually on the news today. There was a brief...
Well, first of all, Commander Fravor was the F-18 pilot off the Nimitz that was sent out to find out what this stuff is. But and it wasn't just... I got a chance to talk to him recently. And it wasn't just a radar image. I mean, Commander Fravor had eyes on it for over 5 minutes watching this thing, as 4 other pilots did. So this wasn't a radar blip or anything. I mean, these guys were watching this thing. But, one of the things I think in the gimbal video, the way the craft that we worked on flies is it doesn't fly like a conventional aircraft does, and it doesn't fly like a flying saucer would in a 1950s movie. It flies belly first. I mean, it may set down conventionally, but it always rotates. It does a roll maneuver, puts its belly towards the target, and then moves away at high speed.
So it would be like a car flying with the wheels forward.
Right. I mean, it may land on the wheels, but at some point when it wants to leave, flips up, points the wheels where it wants to go, and takes off. And the gimbal video, you can see the craft do the roll maneuver. And it's really interesting. It behaves exactly like the craft that I worked on.
So much like we have different shaped aircrafts and fighter jets and cars, they probably have different shapes of these objects that operate under similar principles.
Right, but
Perhaps.
they all have the same power source.
They all have the same power source. And we're also dealing with, if you think about the laws of technological progression, you know, you think of Moore's law and you think of how things accelerate, you've got to think that if this civilization is who knows how many years more advanced than we are, if not even years. I mean, we're thinking about it in terms of conventional terms, right? The way we look at the world. I mean, they might be just superior in terms of their intellect. They've got to be. Maybe. We don't know, right?
Well, the only reason I say that is because, look, everyone doesn't necessarily start at a steam engine
Right.
and go to an internal combustion engine and then, you know, electric power, nuclear power, and go up the ladder that we came on. You know, the binary, if the stuff is true about the origin and the binary star system, and they have heavier elements that we don't have, and this stable element 115 is a naturally occurring material, maybe that's the first thing they started experimenting with. And the version of their steam engine, their first product, was something that operated like this. And actually, when they came to Earth to look around, or, you know, whatever, they were amazed at the stuff we were doing. These guys burned stuff and squirted out the back to go forward. So,
Right.
you know, who says they follow any kind of normal progression like that?
My thought was, if you went back to the 1400s and then you went from 1400 to 1500, you're not going to see that much of a difference technologically.
Right.
If you go from 2000 to 3000, I assume there's going to be a radical change.
Right. Well, the delta, the rate of change
Yeah.
is magnificently higher than it used to be.
Right. So if you think about what they had in 1988 and you think about what they probably have in 2019, just logically, it seems like they would advance.
I would think so.
The only question is, like, are they living? Is that a living thing in terms of like a biological thing? Or are they some sort of an artificially created creation like we are working on right now? I mean, we're in the middle of working on artificial reality, artificial beings, sentient beings, artificial intelligence. There's silicon-based life forms that they're essentially trying to create.
You know, machines.
Right.
Well, they seem to have no sex organs. The way they're described by people that have had interactions with them, assuming these people aren't liars
Right.
or crazy or whatever.
Right.
That they have no sex organs and that they don't seem to have any muscle. They're just almost like a frame.
Right.
And they have enormous heads.